As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet streets, I decided to take a late-night walk. The tranquility of the night always appealed to me, a soothing balm to the chaos of the day. The air was crisp, and the faint rustle of leaves underfoot was the only sound accompanying my solitary footsteps. Little did I know, this night would etch a haunting memory in my mind, forever changing my perception of the dark. I wandered aimlessly, lost in thought, until I found myself in an unfamiliar part of the town. The streetlights here flickered erratically, casting an eerie glow on the deserted pavement. An unsettling feeling crept over me, a sense that I was not alone. I quickened my pace, trying to shrug off the feeling, but it clung to me like a cold mist. Suddenly, a chilling scream pierced the night. It came from a nearby alley. My heart raced, and for a moment, I contemplated running away, but a sense of moral obligation overpowered my fear, and I cautiously approached the alley. The scream had ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. As I peered into the darkness, I could barely make out a figure huddled against the wall. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response. I stepped closer, my phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw her, a woman, her clothes torn, eyes wide with terror. She was muttering something incoherent, her gaze fixed on something behind me. I turned around swiftly, heart pounding, but there was nothing. When I looked back, the woman had vanished. Confusion and fear overwhelmed me. I was sure she had been there a second ago. Had my mind played tricks on me? Shaken, I decided to head back home. The streets now seemed menacing, the shadows lurking in every corner. Every sound made me jump. I was no longer enjoying the night. I wanted nothing more than the safety of my home. As I hurried along, I felt an unmistakable sensation of being watched. I quickened my pace, but the feeling grew stronger. I dared not look back, fearing what I might see. The streetlights flickered more violently now, as if mirroring my growing panic. Then, without warning, the lights went out, plunging me into darkness. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. In the suffocating blackness, I heard soft, whispering voices. They seemed to be coming from all around me, unintelligible, yet filled with malice. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for light, but it wouldn't turn on. Panic set in, my heart racing like a trapped animal. I started running blindly, guided only by my instinct to escape. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if they were chasing me. After what felt like an eternity, I saw the faint glow of my house in the distance. I pushed myself, ignoring the burning in my lungs. As I reached my front door and fumbled with the keys, the whispers abruptly stopped. The streetlights flickered back to life, bathing me in a comforting, familiar light. I rushed inside, locking the door behind me, and collapsed against it, gasping for air. The silence of my house was a stark contrast to the terror I had just experienced. I couldn't comprehend what had happened. Was it all in my head? A trick of light and shadow? I didn't sleep that night, nor many nights after. The whispers haunted my dreams, and the darkness no longer felt like a friend. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home, lurking just outside my field of vision, waiting. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night started to fade, becoming more like a bad dream than a real experience. But sometimes, when the night is quiet, I hear a faint whisper, like a distant echo of that terrifying night, reminding me that some horrors are too real to be forgotten. In the heart of rural Appalachia, where the dense forests seem to swallow up the light, even during the day, there's a story I rarely share. It happened to me, a regular guy, a few years ago. I've always been a rational person, but this experience, it still sends shivers down my spine. It was late November, and I had decided to spend a weekend in my family's old cabin. It's an isolated place, nestled deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest town. the perfect spot for some solitude and reflection. The first day was uneventful, filled with the sounds of nature and the crackling of the fireplace. But that night, things changed. As I settled into bed, the wind outside picked up, howling like a pack of wolves. I tried to sleep, but a deep, unnerving feeling of being watched crept over me. I told myself it was just the isolation getting to me. Then, a sound broke the silence, a faint tapping. At first, I thought it was just a branch against the window, but the rhythm was too consistent, too intentional. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the front door. My heart raced as I crept out of bed, moving slowly towards the door. Maybe it's just an animal, I thought, trying to reassure myself. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. As I reached the door, the tapping stopped. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Then, gathering my courage, I flung the door open. Nothing. Just the dark, dense forest and the howling wind. Relieved, yet still uneasy, I closed the door and locked it. But as I turned around, a chill ran down my spine. There, on the floor, were wet footprints, leading from the door to where I was standing. I stood, frozen, my mind racing. There was no logical explanation. I hadn't left the cabin since I arrived. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone, or something, had been inside the cabin with me. Panic set in. I checked every corner of the small cabin, but found nothing. No one was there. The only thing out of place was the back window, slightly ajar. Unable to sleep, I spent the rest of the night by the fireplace, every creak and crack of the old cabin making me jump. The feeling of being watched never left me. As dawn broke, I decided to leave. I packed my things and hurried to my car. But as I left, I noticed something that stopped me in my tracks. Outside the cabin, circling the entire building, were footprints. Not human, not animal, something different. Large, with elongated toes and a strange gait, as if whatever made them was not used to walking on 2 feet. I didn't stick around to investigate. I got in my car and drove, not stopping until I reached the safety of the town. The locals have their stories about the woods, tales of spirits and creatures that roam the Appalachian forests. I never believed them, not until that night. Even now, I can't explain what happened in that cabin. Was it a ghost, a creature from local legend, or something else entirely? Whatever it was, it left me with a deep sense of unease, a feeling that, in the deep, dark woods, we are never truly alone. The night was unusually silent, as if the world held its breath. Alone in my old family home, nestled in a forgotten corner of the countryside, I felt the weight of solitude more than ever. I was a man in my early 30s, accustomed to city life, but this visit to my childhood abode was necessary to sort out some lingering family affairs. As darkness enveloped the house, I couldn't shake off a creeping sense of unease. The creaks and groans of the old structure seemed louder, more ominous. I tried to distract myself with sorting through old photographs and letters, relics of a past long gone. The clock struck midnight when I first heard it, a faint tapping, like fingers drumming against wood. Rationalizing it as the house settling, I continued my work, but the sound persisted, growing louder, more insistent. I stood up, my heart racing, and followed the noise to the living room window. Peering outside, I saw nothing but the oppressive blackness of the night. Returning to my task, I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but then a low, guttural growl echoed through the room, freezing me in place. It wasn't human, nor did it sound like any animal I knew. I crept towards the source of the sound, my every step creaking on the wooden floor. The growl grew louder, now accompanied by a scratching sound, like claws against the walls. My mind raced with possibilities, wild animals, an intruder, or something worse. Then, the power went out. Plunged into darkness, my heart pounded in my chest. I fumbled for my phone, its dim light my only solace. The scratching grew more frantic, more desperate. It was coming from the basement, the one place I dreaded most in the house, where childhood fears lingered in the shadows. Gathering my courage, I made my way to the basement door, each step an effort against the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. I opened the door, the hinges groaning a protest. The air was colder here, thick with the mustiness of disuse. The phone's light barely pierced the darkness. As I descended the stairs, a cold draft hit me, carrying a foul, unidentifiable odor. The growling stopped, replaced by a suffocating silence. My hand trembled as I shone the light around the room. There, in the far corner, stood a figure. Humanoid, but grotesquely misshapen, its eyes gleaming in the dim light. I froze, terror seizing me. It wasn't an animal, it wasn't human. It was something else, something that had no place in the realm of the living. It moved towards me, slow, deliberate. I wanted to run, to scream, but I was paralyzed. The creature's features became clearer, a twisted visage of agony and malice. It was as if it was born from the very essence of the house's forgotten horrors. In that moment of terror, a surge of adrenaline broke my paralysis. I turned and ran, stumbling up the stairs, slamming the door behind me. I could hear it, whatever it was, banging against the door, the sound of splintering wood following me as I raced through the house. I grabbed the keys to my car and bolted outside, not daring to look back. The night air was cold, but it felt like freedom compared to the suffocating terror of the house. I drove away, not stopping until the house was nothing but a distant memory in my rearview mirror. I never returned to that house. I sold it as soon as I could, never revealing the true reason for my haste. Some nights, when the world is silent, I can still hear that growling, that scratching, as if it's etched into my very soul. I know I encountered something that night, something unexplainable and terrifying, a reminder that in the darkness, we are never truly alone. In the depths of rural Arkansas, where the whispering pines sway under the moon's gaze, there's a tale that chills the locals to the bone, a story I wish I had never become a part of. It all started on a crisp autumn evening. I was a college student then, staying at my grandpa's old cabin for some peace and a break from the city's relentless pace. The cabin, nestled amidst the dense woods, had always been a place of solitude, where the only sounds were the rustling leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. That night, I decided to venture out for a walk. The moon was full, casting eerie shadows through the trees. There's something about being alone in the woods at night that sharpens your senses. Every crackle of a branch, every rustle of the wind feels amplified. As I strolled, lost in thought, a sudden chill ran down my spine. It felt like someone was watching me. I shrugged it off as nerves. After all, I was alone out here. Or so I thought. I reached a small clearing where the moonlight bathed the ground in a ghostly glow. That's when I heard it. A faint whisper, almost like someone calling out. My heart raced. I looked around, but there was no one. Deciding it was best to head back, I turned towards the cabin. That's when I felt it. A cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but there was nothing, just the dense trees and the darkness beyond. The walk back felt longer, every step heavy with fear. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see a figure in the shadows, but there was only emptiness. Once inside the cabin, I locked the door and tried to calm my racing heart. I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind in the eerie solitude of the woods. But as the night deepened, strange things began to happen. The wind howled like a mournful spirit, and the cabin creaked and groaned as if conversing with the unseen. I tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Then, in the dead of the night, I heard it, a soft tapping on the window. My eyes snapped open, and for a moment, I lay there, paralyzed with fear. The tapping continued, persistent, deliberate. Gathering my courage, I got up and approached the window. My hand trembled as I drew the curtains. There was nothing there, just the shadows of the trees swaying in the wind. Relieved, yet unsettled, I tried to convince myself it was just a branch. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The tapping had been too rhythmic, too intentional. As I lay back in bed, the room grew colder, and a sense of dread enveloped me. I felt a presence in the room, something malevolent and unseen. The air grew thick, and it was hard to breathe. Then, the unimaginable happened. A whisper, right next to my ear, so clear it couldn't be denied. "Leave," it said, a command more than a request. In a panic, I bolted upright, the room spinning around me. There was no one there, but the whisper lingered in the air, a chilling reminder that I wasn't alone. I didn't sleep that night. As soon as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I packed my things and left, vowing never to return. The locals say the woods are haunted, that there are spirits that roam the land, remnants of a time long gone. I never believed in such tales, but after that night, I couldn't deny the truth. The experience haunted me for years, a chilling reminder of the unseen forces that lurk in the shadows. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that cabin, but one thing is certain. I was not alone that night, and whatever was with me, it wasn't just a figment of my imagination.